Goring awakens in a concrete cell at level 48. Trimagesi, his cellmate, explains that they are in a tower-style holding facility known as the Pit. Food arrives on the platform once a day, which is a solid slab of unspecified material that descends from level 0 and stops for 2 minutes on each level. Prisoners are only allowed to eat while the platform is stopped on their level, and any food they keep is subjected to fatal temperatures. The lower the level, the less food remains on the platform. Every month, prisoners are randomly reassigned to a new level. Trimagesi reveals that when he was assigned to level 132, he and a former cellmate cannibalized someone who had fallen down. One day, a woman named Miharu rides down the platform. Trimagesi explains that she descends the pit once a month to look for her child. Goring agreed to spend 6 months in the facility in exchange for a college diploma, while Trimagesi transferred in after serving a year-long sentence for manslaughter. They become friends during the first month, but when the room shuffle occurs, they are reassigned to level 171. Trimagesi ties up Goring while he sleeps, expecting to find no food. Trimagesi explains his plan to sustain them both with Goring's flesh. Trimagesi begins cutting into Goring's flesh on day 8. Miharu arrives, attacks Trimagesi, and frees Goring, who fatally stabs him. Goring, encouraged by Miharu, eats Trimagesi's flesh and is then haunted by hallucinations of Trimagesi. By the end of the month, Goring is still seen eating pieces of Trimagesi's decomposing body. In the 3rd month, Goring awakens on level 33 alongside Imagiri and her dog, Ramesses II. Imagiri appears to know Goring but does not recognize her. It is revealed that Imagiri was the administration official who interviewed Goring before sending him to the pit, but she claims to have been unaware of its nature and volunteered after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. Imagiri only eats every other day, and her dog eats on the days she does not. She tries to persuade the couple below them to be more conservative with their rations. One day, Miharu arrives injured, and Goring and Imagiri nurse her back to health. The next day, Imagiri is devastated to discover that Miharu has killed and eaten her dog. Goring steps in, breaking up a fight between the women. After Miharu leaves, Goring mentions her child to Imagiri, who informs her that there are no children in the pit and Miharu arrived alone. She reveals that Miharu is an actress who aspires to be the Asian Marilyn Monroe, and that she brought a ukulele to the pit. She also says there are 200 levels in total. The following month, he awakens on level 202 to discover Imagiri has hanged herself. Goring eats her flesh to survive while experiencing hallucinations of his former cellmates. In the 5th month, Goring is promoted to level 6. His new cellmate, Bahara, tries to climb to the levels above using a rope, convinced that the pair above will assist. The pair deceives him, causing him to lose his rope and nearly die. Goring, estimating 250 levels, persuades Bahara to ride the platform down with him and ration the food. Going down the first 50 levels, they refuse to let anyone eat, claiming that they will get food the next day. They appear to have attacked and killed a couple of protesters. Fellow prisoner Senior Brambang recognizes Bahara and chastises him for being overly aggressive. He advises them on how to conduct themselves the rest of the way down and persuades them to send a symbolic message to the administration by leaving a single panna cotta unfinished. As they descend further, they distribute food to the prisoners and attack those who refuse to cooperate. They eventually come across Miharu being attacked and attempt to save her, but she is killed and they are severely injured after a lengthy fight with Miharu's attackers. Goring and Bahara continue their descent, eventually reaching level 333, where Goring discovers a child, Miharu's daughter, hiding under the bed. He gets off the platform with Bahara, only to find that it continues downward, leaving them behind and in distress. Goring attempts to persuade Bahara to feed the girl the panna cotta, arguing that the girl should be the message instead. Bahara repeatedly says that panna cotta is the message, but eventually changes his mind and gives the girl the dessert, saying that the girl is the message. Goring has a dream about Bahara telling him that the girl is the message. When he wakes up, Bahara has died from blood loss. When the platform reaches their level, the child and an injured Goring slowly climb aboard. They descend to the bottom of a dark pit, where he once more hallucinates Trimagesi. Trimagesi informs Goring that his journey is over, but Goring explains that he must deliver the message. Trimagesi responds that the message requires no bearer. Goring exits the platform, realizing Trimagesi is correct, and the two walk away, watching Miharu's daughter ascend. Helen, John Wick's wife, died of an illness that wasn't made public. John Wick gets a gift from Helen after she died, a puppy named Daisy and a letter saying that she wanted him to have Daisy to help him deal with her death. At first, he doesn't care about Daisy, but as the day goes on, he begins to like her as they drive around in his old '69 Mustang. At a gas station, he meets 3 Russian gang members. ISF, the boss of the group, insists on buying his car. John doesn't want to sell, and when ISF makes a rude comment in Russian, John responds in the same language and leaves. They follow John to his house, break in at night, and attack him. John is helpless as they kill Daisy and then take his car. The next day, ISF tries to get Aurelio, the owner of a chop shop, to change the car, but Aurelio won't take it and hits ISF when he finds out who owns the car and what ISF did to steal it. Then John goes to see Aurelio, who tells him that ISF is the son of Vigo Tarasov, who is the leader of the Russian crime family in New York and used to work for John. Aurelio then gives John another car. When Vigo calls, Aurelio tells him why he hit ISF. After confronting ISF, Vigo tells him who John Wick is. Vigo's best killer, Baba Yaga, also known as the Boogeyman, retired after falling in love with a woman. Baba Yaga helped Vigo take over his crime group by killing all of his rivals, which Vigo thought was impossible. Vigo wants to protect his son, so he tries to stop John from seeking revenge. John quickly ignores him, so Vigo sends a hit squad to John's house to kill him, but John quickly kills them. Vigo sets a $2 million reward for John's capture. He first gives the offer to Marcus, a seasoned killer and John's teacher, who takes it. John then goes to the Continental to hide out. The Continental is a hotel that only serves killers, and there is a rule that no business can be done there. Upon discovering this, Vigo doubles the reward for anyone able to ignore the law in order to murder John. Winston, the owner of the Continental, tells John that Vigo has ISF looked after at his bar, the Red Circle. John goes to the club and kills ISF's friend Victor along with most of the security staff. However, ISF gets away after Vigo's criminal Kirill restrains John. John gets back to the Continental to treat his wounds before being attacked by Ms. Perkins, a killer who used to know John and was hired to kill him. Marcus shoots the pillow next to John's head to wake him up. He had been watching John sleep through the scope of a sniper gun from a building across the street, which stops her surprise attack. John finally restrains Perkins and makes her say where Vigo's money is. He then leaves her with Harry, Clark Peters, a neighbor and friend, to wait for her punishment for breaking the hotel rules. In the end, Perkins gets away and kills Harry. John goes to a church that is just a front for the money, kills all the guards, and sets fire to Vigo's money and information that Vigo uses against police and government leaders. When Vigo gets to the church, John surprises them, but they are finally stopped. Vigo makes fun of him for getting into a fight over a dog and thinking he could leave his old life behind. John is left to be abused and killed by Kirill and another goon, but Marcus kills the other goon, which lets John get away and kill Kirill. John stops Vigo's car and forces him to tell John where ISF is and collect the reward. Vigo doesn't want to do this, but he does it anyway. John kills all the guards at the safe house where ISF is hidden before killing ISF himself. When Perkins finds out that John and Marcus have been talking, he tells Vigo. Because Marcus betrayed him, Vigo has Marcus tortured and killed in his house. Vigo tells John that Marcus has died, which draws John to his house, where Perkins is ready to surprise him. She almost does, but Winston calls her into a secret meeting and tells her she can't join the Continental because she broke the rules. Winston then has a few other killers quickly kill her. Winston calls John to let him know that Vigo is being taken away by helicopter from the pier. Before getting into a fight with Vigo on the dock, John runs to the bay and kills Vigo's last few goons. Vigo pulls out a knife and points it at John. As they fight, John drives it into Vigo's already hurt midsection. He is startled by this, so Vigo lets John break his arm and get the upper hand. John then stabs Vigo in the side of the neck with Vigo's knife. Vigo is left to die by John. John, who is hurt but can still move, goes to a warehouse on the water that is used as an animal shelter center to try to heal his wound. He then frees a pit bull puppy from one of the cages and is last seen leaving on the beach, which is where he and Helen had their last date. Lucy, Scarlett Johansson, a 25-year-old American lady, lives and studies in Taipei, Taiwan. Her new boyfriend dupes her into acting as a drug mule for his employer, Mr. Zhang, a Korean mob boss and drug lord. Lucy hands over a briefcase to Mr. Jang, Choi Min-sik, holding an extremely valuable synthetic medicine called CPH4. After seeing her partner shot and killed, she is apprehended, and a bag of the narcotic is forcibly sewn into her abdomen, as well as the abdomens of 3 other drug mules who will also transport the heroin for sale in Europe. While Lucy is in captivity, one of her kidnappers kicks her in the abdomen, breaking the bag and releasing a substantial amount of the medication into her bloodstream. As a result, she begins to develop progressively powerful physical and mental talents, including telepathy, telekinesis, mental time travel, and the ability to choose not to experience pain or other discomforts, among others. She kills her captors and escapes. She is shot during the process, but she ignores the pain and calmly digs the bullet out of her body. Lucy visits the adjacent Tri-Service General Hospital to have the bag of narcotics removed from her abdomen. By this point, she can hear surrounding conversations and understands every language. The bag is safely removed, and the operating doctor informs Lucy about the drug's volatile nature, which is based on a substance given to fetuses during prenatal development, as well as its harmful side effects. Lucy returns to Mr. Jang's hotel, murders his bodyguards, assaults Mr. Jang, and uses telepathy to extract the locations of all 3 drug mules from his head. Lucy begins studying her illness at her shared flat and contacts a well-known scientist and doctor, Professor Samuel Norman, Morgan Freeman, whose research focuses on the implications of boosting brain capacity in animals. He also theorizes that life has 2 purposes: to become immortal or to reproduce. Norman hypothesizes that at 20% of brain capacity, humans have control over their own bodies, and at 40%, they have power over other individuals. Could be the key to saving her. Lucy flies to Paris and contacts a local police captain, Pierre Del Rio, to help her locate the last 3 packets of the drug. The Taiwan police are seeking for Lucy following her hospital stunt, so she disguises herself by changing her body shape and structure to avoid detection, as well as commanding other humans and animals. Lucy has deduced that she requires the drug to survive and purchase more time, and that without it, she will most likely die within 24 hours. During the plane flight, she begins to disintegrate as her cells destabilize from drinking a taste of champagne, rendering her body unsuitable for cellular reproduction. Only by eating additional CPH4 can she avoid total disintegration. Her abilities continue to develop, allowing her to telepathically incapacitate armed police and members of the Korean drug gang. Lucy recovers the drug with the assistance of Del Rio and rushes to visit Professor Norman, with whom she promises to share everything she now knows after he points out that the primary purpose of life is to pass on knowledge. Jang and the mob also want the heroin, resulting in a gunfight with the French police. In the professor's lab, Lucy talks on the nature of time and life, as well as how people's humanity distorts their perspectives. At her request, she is given an intravenous injection with the contents of all 3 remaining bags of CPH4. Her body begins to transform into a dark substance, which spreads over computers and other lab things as she transforms them into an unconventionally formed, next-generation supercomputer that would house all of her expanded knowledge of the cosmos. She then embarks on a space-time voyage into the past, eventually arriving at humanity's earliest discovered ancestor, Lucy, and touching her fingertips. Meanwhile, back in the lab, when an M136 at 4 anti-tank weapon blows up the door, Mr. Jang enters and places a gun at Lucy's head from behind, intending to kill her. He shoots, but Lucy achieves 100% brain capacity and vanishes within the space-time continuum, explaining that everything is interconnected and that existence can only be established via time. Only her clothes and the weirdly shaped black supercomputer remain behind. Del Rio then enters and fatally shoots Mr. Jang. Professor Norman accepts a black, monolithic flash drive supplied by the advanced supercomputer formed by Lucy's corpse before it disintegrates into dust. Del Rio asks Professor Norman where Lucy is, and his cell phone rings, displaying a text message, "I am everywhere." In an above picture, Lucy's voice is heard saying, "Life was given to us 1 billion years ago. You now know what to do with it." Wade Wilson ambushes Ajax and a convoy of his men on an expressway. Throughout the ambush, Wilson shows the viewer the events leading to how he became Deadpool. 2 years ago, Wade Wilson, Ryan Reynolds, is a former Special Forces operative who works as a mercenary in New York City. Wilson was dishonorably discharged as a Canadian Special Forces operative. He meets escort Vanessa Carlyle, Maureen Baccarin, at a local bar run by his friend Weasel, and they become romantically attached. Vanessa is a hooker and they both connect by competing to see who got the worst childhood. Wade hires Vanessa as a prostitute, but then takes her to a fair to spend time with her. Later that night, they have sex. 1 year later, Wade proposes to her, and she accepts, but he suddenly collapses. Wade is diagnosed with terminal cancer in his lungs, and though Vanessa remains by his side, he does not want her to watch him die. A recruiter, Jed Rees, from a secret program approaches Wade, offering an experimental cure for his cancer. The recruiter offers to give Wade powers that nobody else has, and to make him into a superhero. Although Wade initially refuses, he decides to leave Vanessa and undergo the procedure. At a laboratory, Wade meets Ajax, Ed Skrein, and Angel Dust, Gina Carano, whom he instantly resents. Wade sees many such terminal patients at the lab, who have been experimented upon with varying results and different mutations. Ajax reveals that his lab is privately funded and not under any sort of government jurisdiction. Ajax and Angel were patients as well. Ajax injects Wade with a serum designed to awaken latent mutant genes. The serum reacts differently with everybody. With Ajax, it gave him enhanced reflexes and scorched nerve endings, which means that he does not feel any pain. Then Ajax has him subjected to days of torture, with a new method of torture each day, each more painful than the last one, to induce stress and trigger the mutation, but without success. Wade discovers Ajax's real name, Francis Freeman, and mocks him for it. In response, Ajax straps Wade into an airtight chamber which raises and lowers the oxygen level to keep Wade constantly on the verge of asphyxiation, leaving him over the weekend, but not before Ajax reveals to Wade their true purpose: to make superpowered slaves to be sold to wealthy customers. While inside the chamber, Wade develops a healing factor that cures his cancer but leaves him severely disfigured as a side effect, with tumor-like scars over his entire body. Wade escapes from the chamber and attacks Ajax but relents when told that his disfigurement can be cured, and he is the only one who can fix it for Wade. Ajax subdues Wade, impales him with a rebar, and leaves him for dead in the burning laboratory. By the next morning, the lab is destroyed, but Wade survived due to his healing abilities. Wilson survives due to his new healing abilities and attempts to return to Vanessa, but is afraid of her suffering because of his appearance and stays away from her. After consulting his best friend Weasel, T.J. Miller, Wade decides to hunt down Ajax and have his disfigurement cured. He becomes a masked vigilante, takes the alias Deadpool, from Weasel picking him in a Deadpool, which is basically a bar bet with odds-on favorite for being most likely to be killed that day. Weasel always bet on Wade, and always lost, and moves into the home of an elderly blind woman named Blind Al, Leslie Uggams. Deadpool chooses a red color costume, based on AL's suggestion, so that his enemies cannot see him bleed, and has a deadpan sense of humor. Over the course of the next year, he questions and kills many of Ajax's associates until one, the recruiter, reveals Ajax's whereabouts. Following a string of leads, Deadpool tracks down Ajax to a convoy of cars on an expressway. Dopinder, Karen Sony, is a taxi driver who befriends Deadpool on the way. He kills all the escorts, corners Ajax, and demands a cure to his disfigurement. The confrontation is interrupted by two X-Men, Colossus, Stefan Kapisic, an X-Men who can transform his entire body into organic steel, and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Brianna Hildebrand, a teenage X-Men trainee who can generate atomic bursts from her body, who have been trying to recruit Deadpool to join them. Colossus says that Deadpool had been warned before about reckless use of his powers. Deadpool refuses to go with Colossus. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ajax escapes. Deadpool is livid and breaks his hands and legs when he tries to attack Colossus. Colossus handcuffs Wade to his wrist and begins dragging him away, planning to take him to Charles Xavier/Professor X back at the X-Mansion. Deadpool cuts off his hand and escapes. His hand slowly regenerates overnight. Ajax knows that Wade will come for him when he heals, and he has no leverage on Wade. Ajax goes to Weasel's bar and learns about Vanessa. Weasel calls Wade and tells him Vanessa is in danger. Wade goes to the strip club where she works but hesitates before he can face her. In the meantime, Ajax kidnaps Vanessa. He and Angel Dust tell Deadpool to meet them on a decommissioned helicarrier in a scrapyard. Deadpool prepares for battle but knows that he will need help. Meanwhile, Ajax tells Vanessa that Wade is still alive, and she has been kidnapped because he still has feelings for her. Deadpool convinces Colossus and Negasonic to help him as he holds them responsible for allowing Ajax to escape, and the trio takes a cab to the scrapyard. While Colossus and Negasonic battle Angel Dust and several soldiers, Deadpool fights his way through Ajax's henchmen and eventually engages him. After Angel Dust defeats Colossus, Negasonic attacks her, but accidentally destroys the equipment holding the helicarrier upright. As the helicarrier tips over, Colossus carries Negasonic and Angel Dust to safety, while Deadpool saves Vanessa. Ajax survives and attacks Deadpool but is subdued and reveals there is no cure for Wade's disfigurement. Despite objections from Colossus, Deadpool kills Ajax. Vanessa then angrily berates Wilson for leaving her, but she reconciles with him after she sees his disfigured face and learns the real reason why he never came back to her. In a post-credits scene, Wade tells the audience that the film is over and announces a sequel featuring Cable. When baby, Ansel Elgort, was a child, his parents died in a car accident. He now has tinnitus, which is continuous humming in his ears that he blocks out while listening to music on his iPods. Baby's life was hard when he was a teen, and it turns out that he tried to steal a car that belonged to criminal genius Doc, Kevin Spacey. Little baby was caught by Doc, but instead of being turned in, Doc made him work to pay off the bill. So, he became an escape driver and took groups of thieves put together by Document. He records bits of talk and makes remixes between jobs. He also takes care of his deaf foster father, Joseph, C.J. Jones. His date, Deborah, Lily James, works as a waitress at a diner where he meets her. Baby was meant to do Doc's last job, but things go wrong when Bats, Jamie Foxx, who hates Baby right away, shoots a security guard. When an armed bystander chases them, things get worse, but Baby gets away from both the bystander and the cops. Baby stops committing crimes now that he has paid off his debt. Joseph tells him to start over and become a pizza delivery driver while Baby stays with Deborah. Doc, however, shows up while Baby is out to a nice dinner with Deborah and demands that he join another heist's crew, threatening to hurt Deborah if he doesn't. Baby agrees, but not easily. The next thief will go after money orders from a post office. Baby is surprised when he gets to their hideout and sees that the group is made up of Buddy, John Hamm, his wife Darling, Isa Gonzalez, who is a sharpshooter, and Bats. All three of them have been on this job before, which is very unusual because Doc won't work with the same team more than once. While the crew tries to buy illegal weapons for the job, Bats figures out that the sellers are actually police and shoots them all, killing most of them. When Baby and Deborah are done, Bats makes her stop at Deborah's diner, where she almost kills Deborah in a hold-up. Doc is mad that the deal didn't go as planned and tries to stop the heist, but Baby talks him out of it. Later that night, he tries to run away, trying to take Deborah with him and leave Atlanta. Buddy and Bats stop him because they found his tapes and think Baby is working for them. But Baby can show that he is not guilty when Doc and the rest of the team play mixtapes that he made. Bats kills a security guard during the heist. Baby is angry and won't drive the crew, so Bats hits him. Baby drives the car into the rebar, killing Bats with the spikes. The three crew members who are still alive run away on foot as the cops follow them. Then there is a gunfight, and Darling is shot and killed. Buddy says he will kill Baby because he killed her. Baby steals another car and runs away to his apartment to get Joseph out of there. Babe leaves Joseph, his money from all the thefts, and a recording asking the staff to take care of Joseph at the door of a senior care home. Buddy is already there when Baby gets to Deborah's diner to pick her up. Buddy is shot by Baby, and he and Deborah run away as the cops follow. Doc doesn't want to help Baby at first because he thinks Baby ruined the heist. Doc gives them money and directions to leave the country because he was in love with himself once and sees that he really loves Deborah. Buddy waits for them in the parking basement and kills Doc by running him over with a stolen police car. They then play cat and mouse, which leads them to a parking garage with several floors. Buddy puts Baby in a corner and fires his gun next to both of his ears, making Baby briefly deaf. Buddy is hurt when Deborah uses a wrench to take away his weapons. Baby then shoots him, killing him as he falls. Baby and Deborah hit a police roadblock while trying to get away from Atlanta. When Deborah is about to ram it, Baby stops her, tells her she doesn't fit in the world of crime, and she gives up. At Baby's hearing, his defense team includes Joseph, Deborah, and a number of people he helped during the thefts. Baby has been given a 25-year prison term and will have a parole hearing after 5 years. Deborah sends him letters and says she will wait for him. After that, Baby is let go and finds Deborah waiting for him in the same way he had thought of before. They kiss. Aladdin speaks to the people of Wadia about uranium-enriching weapons that can be used for medical and other non-lethal purposes. Accompanied by his uncle Tamir, Ben Kingsley, Aladdin arrives at the nuclear plant with the intention of displaying his homemade nuclear weapons. However, he was surprised by how little the nuclear missile they produced. Nadal, Jason Mantzoukas, built the nuclear missile using uranium 2 years ago, but Aladdin informs him that the missile is meant to be sharp point. Aladdin gives the guards the order to execute Nadal after dealing with the two, but it doesn't seem like they do. Aladdin is shot in the head by a guy as he makes his way back to the palace. We find out later that Tamir is the one behind this shooting and Aladdin is the double. After identifying Aladdin's doppelganger, Tamir tells him that it is his duty to be shot in the head. Aladdin is having sex with Megan Fox at night. He has had sex with over 100 celebrities recently, such as Halle Berry, Oprah Winfrey, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and numerous others. According to the news, the UN approved NATO's airstrikes against Wadia, provided Aladdin doesn't directly address the UN. Aladdin plays Terrorist 2K12 on the Wii in the palace. Tamir informs him that the United Nations has demanded that he address the country about the nuclear program while he is playing. Aladdin calls the generals together to discuss the UN. Shooting a general twice by accident is part of his role-playing. Aladdin travels to New York City to give a speech at the UN. The streets were crowded with anti-Aladdin demonstrations and jeers directed at Aladdin's convoy. Tamir employed Mr. Clayton, John C. Reilly, at the hotel to watch over Aladdin all day. Aladdin is kidnapped later that night and taken to the warehouse while he is asleep. There, Clayton kidnaps him and uses the chair to confine Aladdin. When Clayton displays the several torture devices, Aladdin doesn't seem to be very bothered. Aladdin is able to make light of those instruments. In the end, Clayton totally cuts off Aladdin's beard, leaving him unrecognizable. Clayton unintentionally burns himself down after trimming his beard, which lets Aladdin get away. Aladdin traverses the demonstrations against her in front of the UN. Aladdin now sees Tamir replacing his double, Fawad, Sacha Baron Cohen. Aladdin understands that his uncle Tamir has deceived him. Fawad is scheduled to address the country, but in front of the international delegation, he acts awkwardly at the podium. He stumbles to the podium, tumbles off the stage, and swallows a pitcher of his own pee. Then, Fawad unintentionally spills his pee on the Israeli delegate. Fawad is currently speaking to the country about Wadia's new constitution, which aims to abolish the tyranny and restore democracy. Everyone is happy, with the exception of Aladdin. Disappointed, Aladdin attempts to sneak inside the UN, but the police shoot him with a hose, causing pandemonium for everyone else as well. Aladdin is freed by Zoe, Anna Faris, who is confused. Aladdin tells Zoe that he goes by Allison Burgers when she is driving to her Brooklyn business. She sells fruits, plants, and other green things within her business. Tamir, meanwhile, was in the Lancaster Hotel when he saw in the newspaper that a warehouse had burned down and that one person had died. He assumes Aladdin has passed away. Tamir calls the unmarried female bodyguards over to enjoy sex with Fawad. Aladdin exploring Times Square on foot. Nobody believes Aladdin when he tells the guards outside the hotel that he is indeed General Admiral Aladdin. Aladdin watches himself through the glass and sees that Nadal, for whom he created nuclear weapons, leads him out of the building and into the restaurant. Death to Aladdin is the name of the restaurant, which is owned and frequented by many of the individuals that Aladdin personally ordered put to death. The restaurant owner almost recognized him from Wadia. He made up his name when the owner demanded it based on the warning signs: limit occupancy of 120 people, women restroom, staff must wash hands. The diners attempt to attack the proprietor after realizing he is Aladdin, but Nadal steps in to stop them. He is informed by Nadal that not a single person he killed is still alive. Fawad shows up at the hotel in search of a constitution draft. Aladdin and Nadal are outside. When Aladdin notices Zoe, she hides from her. She gets past security by showing a badge given to her by a store inspector. He should accept a job and work for Nadal, she says. After that, he'll grow out the same beard, and on the day of the event, he'll wear it to enter the Lancaster Hotel. Since Zoe is the caterer at the hotel where the signing will take place, Aladdin accepts her offer of employment. Aladdin punches the customer without cause because he manages the store. Even so, he lets the man go while he urinates in order to clean the bathroom, and right before the cab drives by, he tosses a trash can. When the child spills anything on display in the store, he kicks him. The employee who took the money from the cashier's box is confronted by Aladdin. Later, The couple goes on a helicopter excursion with Aladdin and Nadal. While Aladdin and Nadal are joking about, the couple gets scared when Aladdin mentions Osama bin Laden and 9/11. The couple, who seem worried, says they are members of Al-Qaeda. The two jokes concerning the possibility of another 9/11 attack with the Statue of Liberty, Yankee Stadium, and the Empire State Building as its targets. When Aladdin takes off his jacket and reveals the suicide bomb vest, the pair is horrified right away. After being detained for making threats, Aladdin and Nadal are both released on bond. Tamir watches the news at the hotel and learns that Nadal and Aladdin have been detained on suspicion of terrorism. Now that he knows Aladdin is still alive, Tamir gives the big-breasted security woman Etra the order to kill Aladdin. Aladdin learns how to masturbate from Zoe at the store. Later that evening, Zoe presents the mafroom to hotel manager Mr. Ogden during his visitation. Aladdin is in bed when Nadal calls and instructs him on how to continue masturbating like he did before. He is informed by Aladdin that he is prepared to disclose to Zoe who he really is. Aladdin hears clattering after turning out the lights for the night. Etra uses the bigger breast to attack him while he looks into the commotion. Following a brawl, Aladdin locks himself in the stockroom, but Etra breaks through the door. By just tossing her back into the inflated pool of water, Aladdin ultimately ends her life. When Zoe and Mr. Ogden arrive at the store the following morning, they are taken aback by the disarray. Aladdin says he was accosted while engaging in some masturbation. Mr. Ogden therefore terminates the catering agreement. This will be fixed by Aladdin to enhance the store. Aladdin starts setting rigorous rules for everyone, creating a Zoe-centered personality cult, and threatening an inspector into giving the store a positive review. Nadal gets the bright idea to have the late drug lord Sam Douglas grow Aladdin's beard. Sam sleeps in the chapel of funerals. Aladdin and Nadal enter the chapel undetected by dressing as guests in order to take his head off. Zoe received word at the store from the Lancaster that their contract had been reinstated due to Green World's closure. Green World was forced to close after a customer became alarmed upon seeing Sam's severed head, who had previously been planted by Aladdin. The husband abruptly yells for assistance, saying his wife is going to go into labor. Aladdin arrived to assist the mother in giving birth. Following their sexual encounter, Aladdin confesses to Zoe that he is actually the General Admiral. When Zoe finds out, she gets angry and ends their relationship. Aladdin walks out of the shop. In Times Square, news flashes depict Wadia residents celebrating the collapse of the regime, smashing his statue, and commenting on how hated they are. Aladdin tries to jump from the Brooklyn Bridge to end his life, but Nadal stops him. The following day, Nadal uses a zipline to assist Aladdin in entering the hotel where the signing ceremony is taking place. Sadly, Aladdin finds herself stranded in the center of the zipline. Nadal comes up with a plan to remove everything from Aladdin's pocket so he may enter. Aladdin enters the hotel successfully as the zipline yields. When he saw Effawad there, he commanded him to leave. He torches Tamir's document in front of the UN delegation during the signing ceremony, and he passionately defends the benefits of dictatorship while unintentionally drawing analogies to contemporary American problems. But as soon as he sees Zoe in the space, he confesses his love for her and promises to democratize his nation and make Wadia's oil resources available for commercial ventures, as long as he keeps in mind Zoe's deeply held beliefs. Tamir, who is upset that Aladdin is still in charge, tries to kill him, but Effawad dodges the bullet and lives, declaring that it is his responsibility to shoot himself in the head. Tamir is then taken into custody. In order to participate in the election, Aladdin and Zoe will return home to Wadia. When Wadia held its first democratic elections a year later, we saw a number of people waiting in line to vote for Aladdin's opponent. However, because of Aladdin's support, the tank pointed towards the crowd, forcing them to cast ballots for him, who went on to win the presidency. After that, he marries Zoe, and to his surprise, she breaks a glass and shows her Jewish heritage. Scenes from the credits see Aladdin's convoy, which is now made up of environmentally friendly vehicles, visiting Nadal, who has been reinstated, and later, Zoe announcing on television that she is expecting their first child. Aladdin asks if Zoe is having a boy or an abortion in response to the news. Originating from a post-apocalyptic North America, the nation of Panem is composed of 12 impoverished surrounding districts and a prosperous capital. One boy and one girl from each district, ages 12 to 18, are chosen by lottery, the reaping, to take part in the yearly Hunger Games as retribution for a previous uprising. In an arena, the competitors, or tributes, must battle to the death. The lone survivor is rewarded with riches and notoriety. 12-year-old Primrose Everdeen is chosen from District 12 for her first reaping. Jennifer Lawrence's character Katniss, her elder sister, offers to step in for her. The other tribute from District 12 is Peeta Mellark, Josh Hutcherson, a baker's son who once fed Katniss bread while she was starving. Gale, Katniss's boyfriend, is deeply offended by the violence in the games and thinks that if people quit playing, the games would end on their own. After being brought to the capital, Katniss and Peeta get advice from their inebriated mentor, former victor Haymitch Abernathy, Woody Harrelson. He cautions them about the careers from Districts 1 and 2, who nearly always succeed in the games after undergoing rigorous training at special academies. Additionally, he claims that insignificant items in the game could spell the difference between life and death. Only sponsors are able to supply necessities like food, water, and fire, and obtaining sponsors requires winning over people to your cause. Sponsors have a 2-week opportunity to observe the tribute's talents during the training and evaluation phase. During the assessment, Katniss, a formidable and astute rival, attracts the attention of sponsors by shooting an apple from their buffet. She receives a great grade. Game maker Seneca Crane is instructed by President Snow to keep Katniss under control should she take over the games. In a surprise interview, Peeta confesses his love for Katniss during a TV celebrity Caesar Flickerman interview. She is first incensed, thinking it's a ruse to win over the audience because sponsors may give in-game goods like food, medication, and tools. But she finds out that Peeta meant what he said. Half of the tributes are slain in the first few minutes of the games, and Katniss barely makes it out alive after defying Haymitch's advice to flee the fighting around the alluring weapons and supplies scattered in front of a building known as the Cornucopia. Peeta helps kill the female tribute from District 8 by forming an uneasy alliance with careers Cato, Clove, Marvel, and Glimmer. When Katniss tries to hide outside the boundaries of the game, Crane forces her back within by lighting the forest on fire. While escape the raging flames, Katniss sustains injuries. In order to keep Katniss alive during the tournament, Haymitch persuades several sponsors to send her some antibiotics. Later, Katniss is located by the careers, who pursue her up a tree. Hiding in a neighboring tree, Rue, a little girl from District 11, alerts her to the presence of a venomous tracker-jacker nest that is dangling from a branch. It falls onto Katniss's sleeping besiegers. With the exception of Glimmer, who is slain by the insects, they all disperse. Due to tracker-jacker poison, Katniss is experiencing hallucinations. Peeta advises her to go. For a few days as Katniss heals, Rue looks after her. Every supply has been gathered by the Alliance and placed in a pile. After having Rue entice them away, Katniss sets off the mines the group had placed surrounding the stash, destroying it. Enraged, Cato murders the child from District 3 tasked with keeping an eye on it. Marvel deals lethal wounds to Rue. After killing Marvel, Katniss tends to the dying Rue. She then gathers flowers and places them all around Rue's body. This causes a riot in District 11 when it is broadcast on television. Seneca Crane, the game maker, is called by President Snow, Donald Sutherland, to voice his disapproval of the way the games are going. The public's portrayal of Katniss and Peeta as star-crossed lovers allows Haymitch to persuade Crane to amend the rules in order to prevent rioting from breaking out. It is announced that tributes may win in pairs from the same district. After learning of this, Katniss goes in pursuit of Peeta and discovers him to have an infected leg sword wound. She accepts the soup sponsor's gift and presents herself as utterly in love with him. An announcer declares that there will be a feast, and that every survivor will receive what they most need. Peeta begs her not to take a chance on buying him medication. Katniss swears she won't go, but she goes to the feast once he goes to sleep. She is ambushed and pinched by Clove. Thresh, the other tribute from District 11, shoots Clove while she is gloating because he heard her torturing Katniss over killing Rue. Just for Rue, he spares Katniss this time. It is the medication that keeps Peeta on the move. The girl from District 5, Foxface, perishes after consuming nightlock berries that she took from Peeta, not realizing that they are extremely toxic. She had lived by avoiding human contact and snatching food from other tributes. To expedite matters, Crane releases a band of hound-like animals known as mutations. After killing Thresh, they drive Peeta and Katniss to escape to the Cornucopia's roof, where they meet Cato. Following a battle, Peeta launches Cato to the beasts below after Katniss shoots him with an arrow. To avoid giving Cato a protracted death, Katniss shoots him. After it appears that Peeta and Katniss have won, the rule that allowed for 2 winners is abruptly withdrawn, forcing Peeta and Katniss to battle to the death. Katniss is instructed to shoot Peeta. Knowing that their deaths would rob the people of a victor, she instead offers him half of the Nightlock. They are quickly declared the winners of the 74th Hunger Games, nevertheless, before they have a chance to take their own lives. Haymitch informs Katniss that as a result of her act of rebellion, she has gained strong adversaries. She and Peeta head back to District 12, where President Snow mulls over the matter and Crane is kept in a room with a bowl of Nightlock berries. After being brought together by an unidentified benefactor, who stays hidden and only communicates through symbols and other means that only other magicians understand, 4 talented street magicians, J. Daniel Atlas, Jesse Eisenberg, Henley Reeves, Isla Fisher, Jack Wilder, Dave Franco, and Merritt McKinney, Woody Harrelson, perform in Las Vegas as the Four Horsemen a year later, supported by insurance tycoon Arthur Tressler. Jack is an all-around player, Daniel is an expert with cards, Henley can break free from chains and locks, and McKinney is a mentalist and hypnotist. In the grand climax, a spectator is asked to assist them in their upcoming prank, robbing a bank. Etienne Forcier, a Credit Republicain de Paris account holder, is that audience member. It appears that Forcier is teleported to his bank in Paris, where he opens a duct to collect money and dump it into the mob of people in Las Vegas. FBI agent Dylan Rhodes, Mark Ruffalo, is called in to investigate the crime after learning that the money is indeed stolen from the bank vault. He is joined with Interpol investigator Alma Dre for the investigation. After questioning the 4 horsemen, they release them since they are unable to provide an explanation. Dylan meets Morgan Freeman's character Thaddeus Bradley, an ex-magician who makes money by divulging the techniques used by other magicians. While in the crowd, Thaddeus made the deduction that the horsemen had stolen the money weeks earlier and had distorted the public's understanding of the current situation. According to Thaddeus, the horsemen removed the actual money from the delivery van that was carrying it to the bank and replaced it with counterfeit money that would burn up completely when activated remotely. The bank customer was recruited from the audience, giving the impression that he was chosen at random, after being surveilled for weeks in Paris. The customer was simply dumped into a mock-up of the actual bank's vault, located directly below the stage, rather than being teleported. Dylan, Dre, and Thaddeus go to the upcoming Four Horsemen show in New Orleans. In the group's grand finale, they take about $140 million from Tressler's bank account and give it to the crowd, who is made up of people whose insurance claims were either rejected or significantly reduced by Tressler's business. Dylan tries to apprehend the 4 horsemen, but they manage to get away with the aid of mesmerized spectators. Tressler, enraged, employs Thaddeus to reveal and degrade the horsemen in their upcoming show. Later, as Dre investigates the history of the 4 horsemen, he finds out about tales of a hidden organization of magicians known as the Eye that plunders from the wealthy and powerful in order to donate to the less fortunate. Dylan discovers that the Eye is a covert organization that only accepts new members twice a century and that candidates must successfully complete a series of tasks with blind obedience in order to be admitted. Additionally, Dylan argues to a skeptic that the case could be connected to a magician by the name of Lionel Shrike, who was so embarrassed after Thaddeus exposed him 30 years previously that he attempted a risky underwater stunt involving a safe and perished. Jack is killed when he wrecks a stolen car that erupts into flames and explodes, but the horsemen are found in New York and manage to flee during the raid to arrest them. The remaining horsemen promise to carry out their last act, which includes robbing a safe manufactured by the same business that created the one in which Lionel Shrike perished. The business has buried the safe deep into a security vault and kept $500 million in it. They play their final act at 5 points, whereupon they appear out of thin air and turn into a ton of money that is thrown to the audience. The actual money is discovered hidden in Thaddeus's Range Rover after it is revealed that the money was counterfeit. After that, Thaddeus is detained on suspicion of being the 5th horseman, despite his protests that he was set up. When Dylan pays Thaddeus a visit in his cell, he informs Dylan that they would have also required an inside man if Jack had not died and that the safe could not have been taken out. As Dylan leaves the sealed cell and returns outdoors, Thaddeus discovers that Dylan is the 5th horseman. When Thaddeus questions Dylan's motivation, Dylan replies that he wants him to serve out the remainder of his days behind bars and walks away. Now that his death was fabricated, Jack is back with the horsemen. When their benefactor, Dylan, is finally introduced to them, they are taken aback. He invites them to enter the Eye. Later, Dylan approaches Dre on the Pont des Arts in France and tells him he is the son of the magician Lionel Shrike, who drowned many years ago. He was the mastermind behind the Horseman plot, which he designed in order to exact revenge on those involved: Thaddeus for making his father feel inferior, the company behind Credit Républicain de Paris and Tressler for refusing to pay the insurance on his father's death, and the manufacturer of the inferior safe that was used in the trick that caused it to fail. But Dre chooses not to report him. With a magically produced key and a lock, Dre declares, "One more secret to lock away." Dre throws the key into the Seine after locking the lock on a chain fence that holds all the locks that have been locked there throughout the years. By 2169, genetic engineering has made it possible for people to stop getting older at age 25. A clock implanted in people's forearms shows living time, which can be shared between people through body touch. As soon as that clock strikes 0, one dies. People from different social classes live in different places, which are called time zones. People who are poor live in the ghettos of Dayton, which are mostly populated by young people. They have to work every day to make a few more hours of life, which they have to use to pay for basic needs since people replaced money as time. Rich people live in New Greenwich, which is mostly made up of middle-aged and older people who look young because they stopped getting older at 25. Will Salas, played by Justin Timberlake, is 28 years old and works in a factory. He lives in the ghettos with his mother Rachel, played by Olivia Wilde. Will one day stops 105-year-old Henry Hamilton from being robbed of his time in a bar. Fortis attacks Hamilton. Fortis is the old British mobster boss of a group of middle-aged men called the Minute Men. Will saves Hamilton, who tells him, "Many must die so that a few may live forever." This is because there is plenty of time for everyone to live a full life, but it is saved up for the wealthy to live forever. Will is angry and says that no one should die before their time is up. Hamilton tells him that he no longer wants to live and says, "Your mind can be spent, even if your body is not. We'd like to die. We need to do it." Hamilton says that the rich keep the poor from having children by taking advantage of the time zone system and by rising taxes and prices. If they didn't, where would you put them? Later that same night, Hamilton gives Will 116 years, but only gives himself 5 minutes, which he uses to go sit on a bridge over a canal. Hamilton falls into the water below as his time runs out. Will gets there too late to save him. The timekeepers, the local police team, have different ideas about how he died. A young timekeeper named Yeager thinks that Hamilton has timed out, which means he has killed himself. But a middle-aged experienced timekeeper named Raymond Leon, Cillian Murphy, is sure that Hamilton was killed by a person from Dayton. Will goes to see Burrell and gives him 10 years of time, one for every year they've been friends. When Will gets to the bus stop to meet his mother, she doesn't have time to pay for her regular ride because the price went up all of a sudden. She tries to find someone who can lend her time because she has to go on a 2-hour walk, but no one can. She runs in a panic, watching her life slip away with minutes to go. Will also follows his mom's bus route to find her. When they meet on foot, she runs and jumps into his arms, but her time is up and she dies. Will chooses to get even because he remembers what Hamilton said about how unfair the time system is. He goes to New Greenwich with more than 100 years left on his watch. In order to keep poor people from crossing into their time zones, the rich make sure that those poor people never do. He goes into a casino when he gets there and meets Philippe Weiss, an old rich businessman who lends money for events, and his daughter Sylvia, Amanda Seyfried. Will's arrival in Greenwich caught Sylvia's attention, and she became even more interested when she saw him beat her father at poker almost the whole time. Will is invited to a party at her dad's house. Will is caught at the house by Leon, who takes all of his time except for 2 hours. So Will can get away. He holds Sylvia hostage. As he drives back to the slums with her, he runs into Fortis, who is upset that Will lost all of Hamilton's time while he was unconscious and steals most of Sylvia's. He doesn't get the last half hour, though, because timekeepers are coming up behind him and forcing him to leave. Will wakes up and tells Sylvia that they can go back to his old neighborhood with some of his leftover time. First, they go to see Burrell to get back some time that Will had given him earlier. When they get there, they learn from Burrell's sad wife Greta that he killed himself by drinking too much with 9 years left on his clock. Sylvia gives her jewelry away for just 2 days' worth of money. After finding a place to stay, Will calls Weiss and demands a 1,000-year ransom for Sylvia, which will be given to the people in the slum. From Will's phone call, Leon figures out where he is and goes after him in Dayton. Will finds out that Weiss did not pay the cash, but he still lets Sylvia go. Leon seems to be arresting Will, but Sylvia shoots him in the arm. Leon has no weapons, so Will gives him 2 hours of time so he can leave Dayton before he times out. Will and Sylvia get away in Leon's police car and steal a limo with it. Will tells her later that she can still leave the situation, but she says that her life in New Greenwich has no point anymore. They start a string of thefts from time banks, taking time capsules that keep time equivalents and giving them to poor people. For this, they get a 10-year bounty put on their heads. Fortis finds Will and Sylvia a second time in the end and challenges Will to a time fight. Will beats Fortis by using a move he learned from his late father. Will and Sylvia understand that their previous efforts were pointless because the rich can just raise the cost of living in the ghettos to keep things the same. They are able to steal 1,000,000 years from Weiss private offices in a time capsule. While they are doing this, Will tells Weiss that no one should be immortal if even one person has to die. Leon hits Will's car on the way back to Dayton, but Will is able to give the time capsule to a young girl, who then shares the time with everyone. Leon finally finds Will and Sylvia outside of the city and threatens them with a gun. After noticing that Leon acts differently than the other timekeepers, Will correctly thinks that Leon used to be from the ghettos but was able to get around the system. Will jokes that he needs Leon to return some of the time he lent him so that they can make it until their executions. But Leon learns that he forgot to recharge his own time before going after them and dies. Will and Sylvia will not make it much longer. Will takes his time as he runs to Leon's car. Will changes the time to Sylvia just seconds before she is about to die, just like he did with his mother. Will and Sylvia keep robbing banks to try to bring down the system, even though there is now a $100 million reward on their heads. Meanwhile, the rich are trying to deal with the sudden influx of people from the ghettos who have time to change time zones. The buildings where Will used to work are no longer in use, as shown on the news. The people who keep track of time watch as factory workers cross time zones. Will and Sylvia are getting ready to rob an obscenely large time bank and keep messing with the system in the last scene. In the beginning of the movie, four masked guys carefully plan and carry out a bank robbery. James "Jem" Coughlin, played by Jeremy Renner, is Doug McCrae's, Ben Affleck, hot-tempered best friend. Desmond Eldon, played by Owen Burke, and Albert "Glonzy" Maglone, played by Slane, are also on the team. The men, who are wearing skeleton masks, break into a bank in Cambridge and take control quickly and accurately. Doug stays calm and in charge, giving orders to his team, while Jem scares the bank manager and customers to keep them in line. The bank manager, Claire Kesey, Rebecca Hall, is forced to open the vault by the group. To make sure they can get away, they blindfold Claire and drive her to a beach as a hostage. They then free her without hurting her but tell her very strongly not to call the police. To scare her even more, they throw away her driver's card, which shows that they can find her if they need to. The FBI, led by Special Agent Adam Frawley, John Hamm, is interested in the theft. When Frawley sees how professional the heist is, he starts a relentless chase of the gang. At the same time, Doug finds out from Jem that Claire lives nearby. Always the practical one, Jem wants to kill Claire to tie up any loose ends, but Doug talks him out of it and tells him to keep an eye on her. Doug follows Claire and sets up a meeting at a laundry by chance. He starts talking to her while pretending to be a worried citizen from the area. As they talk, Doug learns that Claire is still very upset about the theft. She talks about her worry and fear, especially since she saw a unique tattoo on one of the thieves that might help her figure out who they are. Even though Claire was skeptical at first, Doug's real charm and care for her make her feel better, and they start to date. This new relationship makes Doug more likable and draws him away from the life of crime he has known. The movie goes into Doug's past and shows that he used to be a good hockey player but got into drugs and crime and lost his way. Stephen McCrae, played by Chris Cooper, is Doug's father and is serving a life term for murder. This has a big effect on Doug's life. Doug's mother left the family when he was young, and he still can't figure out why. Doug's criminal behavior is greatly influenced by Fergie Colm, Pete Postlethwaite, a cruel florist who runs a criminal empire and plans all of their thefts. As Doug and Claire's friendship grows, Doug feels more and more torn about his criminal life. He starts to think about a future with Claire, away from Charlestown and its deadly hold. But Jem, who is always suspicious and angry, finds out about their connection and talks to Doug about it. He tells Doug that getting engaged with Claire is risky and could hurt their plans to commit crimes. Because Fergie wants them to, the gang has to rob a protected car. The fact that the heist happens at Fenway Park during a game shows how bold and well-planned the group is. Even though they were very careful, the heist turns violent when Jem shoots one of the guards without thinking. The gang just barely gets away, but things are getting more dangerous. Doug tells Claire that he wants to leave Charlestown with her after the heist. Doug is involved in the crimes, but Claire doesn't know that. She is excited about starting a new life with Doug. But Doug's choice to leave doesn't sit well with Jem, who feels cheated that his friend wants to give up their life of crime. Agent Frawley steps up his investigation by putting pressure on Doug's crew and keeping track of where they go. Seeing a weakness, he confronts Claire and tells her about Doug's crimes and how he was involved in the bank robbery. When Claire tells Doug the truth, he tells her he loves her and wants to change, which breaks her heart. Claire, who is sad and unsure, tells Doug to leave her alone. Doug chooses to talk to Fergie about his plans to leave and demand his share of the money. Fergie makes fun of Doug's hopes for a better life and says Claire will be in danger if Doug tries to leave. Fergie tells Doug that he was the one who took his mother and used his manipulation to get Doug to stay faithful. Doug learns that he can't run away from his problems without facing them head-on. The gang has one last job to do, which is to rob the Fenway Park cash room. The heist is very dangerous because the FBI is closing in quickly. Doug, Jem, and the rest of the group sneak into the stadium while wearing masks and getting ready for a huge fight. At first, the theft goes as planned, but the FBI, which has been told about it, surrounds the stadium. As the gang tries to get away, a fierce shootout breaks out. Desmond and Glonsey are killed, and Jem chooses to die rather than give up. He goes out in a blaze of honor. Doug gets away by pretending to be a doctor. Doug goes back to Claire, and even though it breaks her heart, she decides to help him. Agent Frawley gets information from her that isn't true about where Doug is. Doug gives her a lot of money that he stole along with a note telling her he loves her and is sorry. One last time, he looks at her from afar before running away from Charlestown. Doug finds safety in Florida, but he can't have the life he wants with Claire. Giving some of his money to fix up a hockey rink in Charlestown is a small way for him to make up for what he did and help the community he hurt. Even though Agent Frawley failed to catch Doug, he is still determined to keep going after him. Claire starts to rebuild her life after having terrible things happen to her. Using the money Doug left her, she plants a garden in the common area of her apartment building to represent growth and new starts. The movie ends on a sad note. At the beginning of the movie, Roy wakes up to the same day over and over again, and right away, a trained killer attacks him in his apartment. This starting scene sets the mood for the whole movie by showing how good Roy is at fighting and how determined his pursuers are to catch him. Even though Roy tries very hard, he is dead and wakes up at the start of the same day. It's not clear how many times this horrible loop has happened, but every day brings new problems and people trying to kill Roy. We'll learn more about Roy's past as he moves through the repeated days. Roy used to be a very skilled Delta Force agent, but things went badly for him after he and his wife, Gemma Wells, Naomi Watts, broke up. In a top-secret lab, Gemma, a very smart scientist, has been working on a project called the Osiris Spindle. Unfortunately for Roy, Gemma's project can change the past and present, which is what put him in this situation. Colonel Clive Venter, Mel Gibson, a former soldier who now runs the Osiris Spindle project, is in charge of the bad guys in the movie. Venter is a cruel and resourceful person who will do anything to make his plans come true. As Roy looks into the case more, he learns that Gemma set off the time loop by activating the Osiris Spindle because she knew she was in danger and wanted to keep Roy safe. She tried to call him every day, but the loop started over before she could fully explain what was going on. Roy meets a lot of different killers along the way, and each one has their own skills and ways of doing things. There is Guan Yin, Selena Lowe, who loves killing Roy over and over, and Kaboom, Aaron Bielner, who is so good at shooting that his pride is the only thing that matches it. Roy keeps running into these killers, which leads to many creative and brutal fight scenes that show off the movie's action routines. Roy starts to make good use of the time loop despite all the chaos. He carefully studies the habits and patterns of his killers, improving his skills and coming up with new ways to stay alive longer every day. A little at a time, he slowly figures out how the Osiris Spindle is connected to Venter by making mistakes. Roy is determined because he wants to protect his teenage son Joe, Rio Grillo, who he hasn't talked to in a while. The time loop gives Roy a chance to get back in touch with Joe, repairing a relationship that had been damaged by Roy's troubled life. Roy's training with Daifeng, Michelle Yeoh, a martial arts master who helps him get better at fighting, is one of the best parts of the movie. This montage not only shows a big change in Roy's physical skills, but it also shows how much he has learned about how important it is to be patient and persistent. Roy's quest to break the loop is helped a great deal by Daifeng's lessons. Roy faces Venter and his goons more than once because each time he does so, he learns more about the time loop and gets closer to finding the truth. Venter really wants to be in charge and have all the power. He thinks that the Osiris spindle can help him do that by changing time and reality itself. The fact that Roy keeps dying shows how important the project is to Venter and how far he will go to protect it. At the end of the movie, Roy makes big steps toward turning off the Osiris spindle. Roy comes up with a plan to break into the high-security lab and face Venter for good, using the knowledge and skills he has gained from doing things over and over again. The action is very intense in this scene, with Roy outsmarting and beating the killers who have been after him the whole movie. His meetings with Guan Yin, Kaboom, and the other killers come to an exciting end that shows how much he has changed and how determined he is. Venter has Gemma locked up, and Roy finally gets to her at a very sad moment. When they get back together, it's sad because Gemma tells them how powerful the Osiris spindle really is and what will happen if they abuse it. She begs Roy to stop the project at all costs, even if it means giving up his own life. The movie is about love, redemption, and how far someone will go to protect their family. This emotional conversation shows these ideas. The end fight between Roy and Venter shows how strong Roy is and how he has found his new purpose in life. Roy is able to beat Venter and his forces by using the skills and information he has gained from doing things over and over again. Roy turns off the Osiris spindle at the end of the time loop story, breaking free from the circle of death and repetition. When the movie ends, Roy wakes up to a new day, free from the time loop. Roy takes advantage of the chance for a fresh start at the end of the movie, which is both enjoyable and thought-provoking. After getting back in touch with Joe, he feels hopeful and determined about the future. Roy has changed after going through the time loop. It taught him the value of patience, love, and the chance to be forgiven. To sum up, this movie is an exciting and action-packed movie that mixes science fiction, dark humor, and intense fight scenes very well. Frank Grillo gives an amazing performance as Roy Pulver, a man who is stuck in a never-ending time loop and has to fight killers and find out about a dark plot. The movie is one of the best in the time loop genre because it explores time manipulation and has exciting action scenes and a touching story. In the end, this movie is a story about how people can grow as people, how powerful love can be, and how the human spirit can survive against all odds.
The movie starts in space, where the starship Avalon is on autopilot and going to the colony world of Homestead 2. This is happening at the same time that a lot of people are leaving Earth. During the 120-year trip, the crew and the 5,000 guests will all sleep in pods. It has been 30 years so far. The ship goes through a storm of meteors, and power is sent to the front shields. Then, the ship hits a big meteor, and the power blinks and red alert screens come on in the control room, but everything goes back to normal quickly. There's been a bad thing. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer played by Chris Pratt, wakes up in his pod to hear a cheerful computer voice tell him that they will soon be at Homestead 2. He is told that it is normal to feel weak and confused after hibernating. His wristband is scanned, and the machine tells him how to get to his sleeping cabin. He goes to an introduction about life as a colonist on Homestead, but he is the only one there. The next morning, he wakes up and tries to figure out what to wear when he meets other people. He then goes to a cafeteria where he is the only one. The happy computer-made teacher doesn't understand why he wants to know why there's no one else there. Jim goes to the main concourse, but the information booth can't help him. He is by himself. Jim finds the instructions for everything on the ship. He can't get into the area with the crew pods to try to wake someone up to get help, and he also can't get into the area where the crew is in charge. His tag does not let him go where he needs to go. He finds an office where he can send a message to the Homestead company, but he is told that it will cost a lot. He sends a message saying he is the only one awake and needs help. Then he finds out that no one on Earth will get his message for 15 years. Jim finds an android bartender named Arthur, played by Michael Sheen, who he can talk to. He looks at the instructions for the sleep pods, but he can't figure out how to get it going again after the person has woken up. The android is programmed to give bartender tips, like if you don't like where you are, change it. Jim is a general class passenger with a simple cabin, and he sneaks into a suite with better amenities. A year goes by, and Jim uses the ship's entertainment options, but since he has no one else to talk to, he grows more and more lonely. He goes to a place where people can put on a space suit and go outside while still being safe because they are still attached to the ship. Jim thinks about killing himself by opening the airlock without a spacesuit, but he stops and runs to the pod room instead. He trips near a pod with Aurora Lane, Jennifer Lawrence, a beautiful woman, inside. He looks at the information she wrote down about each traveler before the ship left port. She is a journalist, and she is going to Homestead to have an adventure and find out why people choose to be colonists. He reads her stories and thinks she's perfect. He has trouble deciding whether or not to wake her up. He knows that if he does, she will die on the ship, but he can't stand being alone for another year, so he wakes her up by hand, hiding so she doesn't see him. Aurora is woken up by the same happy computer program that takes her to her cabin to sleep. The next day, Aurora wakes up alone and goes to the main area of the airport, where she meets Jim. He tells her the truth about how long he's been awake, but he doesn't tell her that he woke her up. He has asked Arthur, the robot bartender, not to tell Aurora what he has done, and Arthur has agreed. Aurora and Jim talk every day and talk about what they can do to fix the pods. Aurora swims, runs, and starts writing the story she wants to tell. She asks Jim why he left Earth, and he tells her that he likes to make things and fix things, but on Earth, broken things are just replaced. He wants to build his own house and live in it. She planned to go to the colony, stay there for a year, and talk to the people there about why they left Earth. Then she would go back to Earth. Aurora is a gold-class guest, and she uses that to get him fancier breakfasts than he would get with his regular clearance. After getting to know each other for a while, Jim asks Aurora out on a date, which she agrees to. After they eat, he takes her to the room with the two spacesuits. There, they both put on a suit and then go outside. Aurora is happy when they get back inside, and they go to Jim's shack to make love. They are happy and have a pattern of working out, looking at the stars, and using the ship's restaurants and entertainment options. A year goes by, and Aurora's birthday comes around again. Jim plans a special treat for her, and he makes her a ring. Aurora tells Arthur that she and Jim don't keep any secrets from each other. Jim agrees, but he doesn't realize that Arthur thinks this means that Jim has told Aurora that he woke her up. Arthur tells Aurora that Jim picked a good person to wake up when he went into the men's room. Aurora is heartbroken and angry, and she tells Jim to stay away from her. One night, while he is sleeping, she goes into his cabin and hits him with her hands. Jim tries to explain himself over the ship's radio while Aurora is running away, but Aurora screams that Jim killed her. While all of this is going on, system breakdown alerts are coming into the control room more and more often. Jim and Aurora have noticed little things, like how the robots that clean have system problems. It's already been 2 years since the meteor hit. One day, Gus Mancuso, Lawrence Fishburne, a deck crew chief who got up early, shows up on the walkway. He says that hibernation pods have never failed before, so something big must be wrong. His wristband lets them into the command center, where they find that the ship's automatic diagnostics have stopped working and they need to check every deck by hand. Gus finds that there have been a series of failures, and the computer can make a chart that shows the first failure happened 2 years ago. Before Gus can do this, there is a big problem with gravity, and Aurora almost drowns in the pool while she is swimming. Gus figures out that when the first few failures happened, the power was switched to try to even out the load, but the load got too heavy and caused more and more failures. The ship as a whole is in danger of dying in space, which would kill everyone on board. The main engine area was the first to be damaged. But they will have to do a manual inspection to find out where. Gus passes out at this point, so Jim and Aurora take him to the hospital and put him in the auto-diagnostic machine. Necrosis is happening all over his body, and he will die soon because his sleep pod is broken. He puts on his outfit and gets ready to die. He gives Jim and Aurora his wristband so they can get into the parts of the ship where they need to go to fix things. Jim and Aurora are working on engineering when they find a hole made by a rock that goes through some important places. When they open one door, Aurora is almost pulled out through a hole in the ship when they open that door. She stops it with a tablet that Jim gives her, and Jim seals the hole with a liquid sealant. The area gets too crowded, and they find out that the smoke from the fusion engine has to be let out by hand. Jim has to put on a spacesuit and go outside to fix the manual workaround because it won't work. He has to go into the exhaust pipe to open a flap, but it won't stay open unless Jim holds it open so that the manual vent will work. Aurora is now so afraid of losing Jim that she fights with him over the radio, but she still pulls the lever. Jim is pushed out, his leash breaks, and his suit gets ripped. He tells Aurora he is leaving. She runs to get herself into a space suit and go find him. She gets Jim back by pulling on his leash, but when they get inside, he doesn't move. She drags him to the hospital, where an auto doctor tells her that Jim is dead. Aurora uses Gus's wristband and his bypass code to get the machine to revive Jim, and it works. She is glad and happy to hear that he is still alive. Things get back to normal on the ship after a while. Jim works on the auto dock and tells Aurora that he found that he could put her back to sleep in the hospital by using the command override, but then he would be alone again. Aurora decides to stay awake with Jim because she knows she will never see him again. Together, they will make a life on the ship. He gives her the ring he made earlier as a fake engagement ring, which she accepts. After 88 years. It's the end of the trip, and the captain and crew wake up on the Grand Concourse to find a big tree, lots of vines and plants, flying birds, and a cabin that might have Jim and Aurora's grandkids in it. Aurora's voiceover is telling the other people on board her story and telling them how they lived well where they were. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like, share and subscribe button to my channel to see more videos like this.